Thank you for joining us on today's Sparring Partners webinar, How Energy Efficient is Wi-Fi? Our speakers today are Claus Hetting, CEO and Chairman of Wi-FiNOW, and Monica Paolini, Principal at Sensafili. In Sparring Partners webinars, we watch our debaters discuss a topic live on video. We like to encourage our audience to participate in the conversation. Please share your comments and questions using the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom taskbar. All comments are visible to all participants, so please keep the conversation polite and respectful. Our speakers will do their best to address questions as they go along and as they become relevant to the topics being discussed. So do not hold your questions until the end. And with that, we will hand it over to Monica.
Kendra, thank you so much. And as always, it's a pleasure being here. And this is somewhat of a special Sparring Partners. First of all, because it's with Claus, and I love chatting with him, and is an incredible source of information. But also because I've been doing a lot of Sparring Partners recently on energy efficiency and published a report. And as much as I love the report didn't really go deep down into energy efficiency of Wi-Fi. Now, this is really important because when we look at the overall connectivities that we enjoy, something around 80% of the traffic, the latest number from Ofcom is 73% of the traffic on Android devices. So not the overall traffic, just the traffic from smartphones. 73%, according to Ofcom in the UK, is from Wi-Fi. So whenever you talk about energy efficiency in telecom, in wireless, that is the big part of it. So, but interestingly enough, there is not a whole lot of data onto this, and we can get into the reasons why it is so. So I'm very excited about talking about this topic, and especially because there have been a few reports recently that started to address the issue, but we have not got to the bottom of it by, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, I think. So with that, I would like to welcome Claus and ask him to introduce himself, first of all, and then we'll get into the topic. So Claus, tell us, I'm sure everybody knows you, but just in case there is one or two people that don't know who you are, why don't you tell us?
So first of all, Monica, thank you for asking me. I always enjoy these discussions so much. It's so much fun to have these chats with you. And once again, it's a super interesting topic, super hot topic, actually. And I think we're going to have a really good discussion about this. So my name is Claus Hetting. I'm the CEO and Chairman of Wi-FiNOW. And I run this organization, which is basically a Wi-Fi organization for supporting the Wi-Fi industry in any which way that we can. So we run events and we do a lot of content creation, news, and so on, and a lot of webinars. So I'm super happy to be here on this important topic.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start talking about energy efficiency. And one thing that I would like to say, we're talking about efficiency rather than consumptions per se. Sorry, guys. Now we don't need to have the cover. Okay. Because what's happening is that we keep increasing the usage. So it's not so much a question of reducing consumption, which is always a good thing, but it's more a question of how to make our networks more efficient. So use more, but be more efficient about it.
Correct. And let's get into that. But can I just start by saying something? Because it's a political issue, it's an engineering issue as well, but I see it very much right now as a regulatory political issue. Why? Because we've got the WRC 23 coming up in November, and of course the big battle that's going on is for the predominantly for the upper 6 gigahertz band, which in many countries has not been allocated. And of course, as a Wi-Fi industry person, we want that to be no change. So there's a possibility of actually releasing this for shared spectrum with Wi-Fi and so on. So there's all kinds of arguments being thrown around. Of course, the classic arguments, but one of the arguments being thrown around is, one of the questions raised is Wi-Fi or 5G more efficient for the spectrum? So this is why it has, one of the reasons why it is a hot topic right now. I don't know if you agree with this, Monica, but it is actually a hot topic in the sense that And I also talked to you about this because at our Brighton event in WWDC Brighton event in May, we actually had two speakers, one from a vendor, one from a service provider, who spoke at length about this topic, about how to reduce power consumption for gateways, essentially, and the technology, and that goes into that. There are some vendors now that have the ability to manage power consumptions in gateways. So it's a topic for many reasons, political reasons, also of course for saving money. That's the actual proper, if you like, business reason, I think. But I just wanted to start by saying that. Do you agree with that, Monica?
Yes, it is a political thing, and in fact, I sent you a link to the Wi-Fi Alliance report. It was an Analysys Mason report, and I'm going to send you the link as well to that.
Yes.
And
yes.
the report that you just mentioned, that it's a very good one. So I'm going to send you the links to all of them. And interestingly enough, and in a way, it's kind of too bad that it's becoming so politically tied to the 6 gigahertz band.
Yes.
Because the good thing is that we are discussing, I mean, there are those reports because of the 6 gigahertz, so that triggered some work. But on the other hand, the issue of efficiency goes beyond that.
Oh, sure.
Clearly the increased power efficiency is a good thing, but I don't think you need that to justify the fact you need to have the 6 gigahertz band as a business. That's a different. You don't need it. You don't need that reason. And in fact, we're gonna have the next Sparring Partners is gonna be about the sharing in the 6 gigahertz.
Okay, cool.
But clearly being energy efficient doesn't create any problem. So let's just say one thing. Let's just say what is that we can all agree on. So first of all, I think that we all know that most of the traffic, wireless traffic, goes over Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anybody disagree with that fact.
No, those are facts.
Those are facts. Now, in terms of efficiency, I think that we can safely say that generally speaking, Wi-Fi is going to be more energy efficient on a per gigabit basis, or whatever you want to say it, than LTE or 5G.
Yes. So the argument for that is relatively close proximity, low power consumption gateways or routers, huge amount of capacity, in fact, across 3 bands now. It's hard to see how that is not more energy efficient, that something trying to beam in from the outside with giant towers. And by the way, one of the points that I also wrote down in my notes when I was studying this, because I have to admit, I'm not an energy efficiency expert yet. I might be after this show, but but one of the things that I was thinking about is, okay, so the mobile folks keep piling on new technologies. I don't think you can put in one transceiver that does all of 3G, 4G, and 5G. As far as I know, it's not what it's about. So you still have 3G and 4G and now 5G. So you're pumping out a tremendous amount of power from these base stations, right? And one of the things that we also talked about, Monica, when we met discussing this, is that there's certain governments, if you like, that are not making the situation any easier, because the EU, the European Commission, is now regulating building structures for being more energy efficient, which means it's going to be a lot harder for 5G or 4G, whatever mobile signals, especially also because they're typically, the 5G bands are higher, right? To beam into homes in order to deliver that capacity. So again, it's a calculation, but from that sort of logic, I feel fairly confident that the reports that I've seen, and we can go through some of that, are fairly accurate on why Wi-Fi is more efficient. And, this is my position right now. And we can talk about it later, but there are actually some good numbers in some of these papers, right?
Yeah, but I think that in some way they kind of missed the point in terms of what are the terms of the comparison. So, for instance, I would say, and I'm not an energy expert either, although I spend a lot of time. It's an incredibly complicated topic.
It is. It's super complicated.
It's super complicated, but so you can see why it's hard, because it's hard to capture it. You can just say this is better than the other. Now, let's say that we have a 5G NRU. And you have in an access point type of format, and you put that next to Wi-Fi. Maybe the energy consumption is not all that different of that device, because it's not so much the access, it's the way it's deployed. Or if you deploy Wi-Fi on a macro, it's going to be require a lot of power.
Correct.
So it's not so much the technology, is how it's being deployed.
Correct.
Wi-Fi is efficient because you use it in the home and you have it in the home.
Yes.
So it's not magic. And in fact, we talk about 6 gigahertz as being Wi-Fi, but it's not Wi-Fi, it's technology neutral. So you can use whatever you want. Nobody's going to stop you from using 4G or 5G.
Nobody's gonna stop. So here's the other thing. I mean, can we agree that you're right? It's about the deployment, but can we also agree that there is never ever going to be? Okay, shouldn't say never ever, right? Maybe China, but generally speaking, the business case for putting 5G indoors as gateways is non-existent, at least for the time being. Unless, I mean, I suppose maybe China is a joker in this. If you really want to, include them.
I disagree. I disagree on that.
Okay.
Because you can see there are enterprises, there are small cells. So is that
but very few though?
No, but I think that there is a role in it, and I'm perfectly fine. But that it doesn't really touch Wi-Fi. It's in addition to Wi-Fi. So,
in addition to, absolutely, I agree.
So the idea that at our home, well, okay, we might be special cases, but in general, that in people's homes, you just say, oh no, there is Wi-Fi, I don't need, there is 5G, I don't need Wi-Fi anymore. That's not going to happen. Even the Wi-Fi vendors acknowledge that.
No. Yeah.
I mean, and they never. So there is. I think that we agree that that's. Wi-Fi is going to take, most of the traffic. In some cases, however, you might want to have okay, so let's say that you live in a very rural place where there is no outdoor coverage with Wi-Fi, with the 5G. You might want to put a small cell in your home. I would.
Yes, but these are marginal cases, though. I mean, these are. Right.
I'll get into that.
Not mainstream. I mean, if there's something the mobile industry doesn't want to do, it's marginal cases. Do you agree? They always want mass market, semi-monopolistic. Sorry to use that word, but it's true.
I agree. But what I'm saying is that let's keep the small cells feasible. But I think that when we look at energy efficiency, we should just look like okay. So there is one of the studies, a study from Analysys Mason, and they compare use of the efficiency of they actually look at different scenarios for 5G and 4G for 5G rather than comparing it directly to Wi-Fi, despite the fact that there's action on that. But they compare macro cells and small cells in an outdoor scenario. So I think that the appropriate comparison would have been to do small cells indoors, but I guess to your point, there is not the huge market in there. So it doesn't make but if you want to look at the potential of the technology, you should be comparing small cells to access points. I mean, indoor access, indoor access cells.
Yes, theoretically, yes, but again, that would be a scenario has very little practical applicability. I mean, we also talked about this, Monica, when we met, in that I think sometimes people like to do this, but it's actually a little bit odd when you compare something that fundamentally does not exist, which is 5G in the 6 gigahertz band, which has to share, by the way. It has to share because you cannot take the microwave and satellites and satellite ground stations or whatever. You cannot take them out.
Yes.
It's not going to happen. And where would you put them? There's nowhere to put them. So it's a road to nowhere to expect that. So 5G in the 6 gigahertz band would have to share with whatever's there. That is a technology, to my knowledge, that does not exist, or at least it may exist on paper somewhere, but it certainly doesn't exist in real life. Now, the difference is with Wi-Fi, everything 6 gigahertz all the way up to 6.2. Even now with AFC, thank God for the Canadians, they just did that, right? So even now with the AFC, there's an ecosystem, there are chipsets, there's everything. You basically just have to say, okay, we're turning it on. So these comparisons are odd, but I mean, of course you can compare anything you like. The question is it a meaningful comparison? And I mean,
no, I'm completely with you. But so from a technology point of view, the right comparison is just well sell. From a market point of view, it is not, because as you say, this is not going to happen. Nobody's going to say, oh, I'm just going to replace my Wi-Fi access point with a 5G thing, even if it exists, because it's more efficient. The other thing is that the access point doesn't actually consume all that much power. Let's just say it.
Right. So I made some notes because I made some notes because of a few things, because as I said, it's a relatively hot topic, right? As I said, at our Brighton event, we had a few speakers on this topic for various reasons. One of the things that one of my clients is a company called Soft at Home. They do gateway software, essentially. They have now a solution for energy efficiency on the gateway side, so you can manage, put them in sleep mode or semi-sleep or something like that. And this I think is a good number. So they say the Wi-Fi piece of the gateway, right? If you like, contributes 30 to 50% of gateway power consumption.
Yes.
So less than half of the consumption comes actually from the power, the Wi-Fi itself, if you like. And they also say that you can, and this I think is important if anybody's doing any modeling on this or wants to do any report on this. They say, okay, but it's very wide. You can reduce the power consumption of the gateway by 15 to 90%. Now, this is a huge range, right? Depending on how you set it up and how whatever intelligence you use. So that's a wide range. But of course, a lot of the time it's just not doing anything. It's sitting there at night and nobody's using it. So and when you're not at home, of course, it's useless, right? I mean, you don't need to have it on. So there's all these things. So that was the first thing. And I think it's important to understand that if anybody does these efficiency calculations in energy, to include this. Now, by the way, there are solutions for this, and I also know there are operators that have their own solutions for how to manage the gateway so they don't sit there wasting energy all the time. And certainly there's one gateway provider that does it now, that has a solution. And Orange France is in fact already using it, and they're using it as a marketing thing as well, saying be better for the environment, use this, it'll help you. Also, of course, pay less money and so on. So these things exist, and I think they should be taken into account, right? That these things are manageable. I don't know, because it's about a household, right? It's about a household. I don't know that you can do, I don't know what 5G people do, because there's some traffic on that thing most of the time anyway, but maybe they can shut down parts of it. I have no idea.
Okay, so
it's complicated.
No. And this is sort of the massive and the low-hanging fruit to do better sleep. Yes. And we have had the technology for a long time, both for Wi-Fi and 5G. So the sleep mechanisms are different for 5G, 4G, yes, and Wi-Fi, but they exist for everybody. But as you say, if you have a cellular tower, usually you cannot just go to sleep, but since you have different channels, you can put some to sleep and not others. So there is a potential for sleep. It's huge in both cases. The difference is that in the macro case, it's actually more effective because you use more power. So in absolute numbers, it's much more, now, one thing that you have to be careful, because you say, well, you can just switch off Wi-Fi at night. Well, not so easy. You don't want to switch it off entirely, because you might have cameras, you have all the IoT stuff.
All of these things.
And also because if you switch off Wi-Fi, then you are back onto the mobile network. So it might be good for you, but it's actually bad for the network. So the Orange paper, interestingly, they basically say, if you are asleep at Wi-Fi, you are taking resources from our cellular network, not good. So, so if you look at it from the outside and you put them together, it's actually better if you, so there are ways to sleep that it's not the depth of the sleep changes. So that
and it's actually exactly.
So you can basically you're still active. So it's not like Wi-Fi is off. It's
no, it's not off.
In this kind of twilight zone.
Exactly, but it's actually a good point. But because you really have to think about what you're doing when you start fiddling with, you know, power management and stuff, right? So it's not necessarily perfectly obvious, right? How these things have to be managed and so on. By the way, I don't know if you're following this.
Yes, we have
my good friend Dean Bubley is on, and he's
yes.
throwing some questions at us, but they're relatively long, so I don't know.
No, but okay, can I read them? Because a lot of people see this on a recorded way and they do not get to read. So let me read Dean's question. That is a, I have just seen the second one, but it's a very good one. Okay, so Dean says the issue is that quite a lot of macro 4G, 5G RAN is used for outdoor to indoor connectivity. That's okay for say 900 megahertz or 1.8, but at a higher frequency, especially with MIMO, that's a poor use of energy for both network and device. For 6 gigahertz, I've heard mobile industry people talk about blasting through walls on a good day, I would say. Because most of the time you blast, but it doesn't go through anyway. I would, you know, for as you go up to 6 gigahertz. If you remember, people didn't want to even use 3.5 because it was too high in frequency back in the day. So far better to use a dedicated indoor system, whether Wi-Fi or cellular, with licensing, which does not need to be exclusive or national regional. Right. More broadly, there is an argument that macro RAN should be offloaded, switched to indoor low power system wherever possible. Could it be voluntary? Could it be even regulated? Could it be if governments get around to having specific policies on the indoor wireless? I have a lot of comments, but I'll let you go first.
No, okay, let me go. No, as always, Dean makes a lot of sense, and I always think beaming something in from the outside is generally a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And of course we've done that forever, right? We've done that since the invention of the mobile phone, essentially, right? But it used to be, in fact, you couldn't get hardly any coverage way back in the old days. Mm-hmm. But I agree with him. The question is then, and this I'll let you comment, but the question is then, the whole offload scenario then actually pops up, right? And I think we need to discuss that, how that, you know, can be brought together, because really the best solution is to use whatever is there all the time anyway, and is most efficient within the environment that you're in. And when you're indoors, that is Wi-Fi. I don't think there's any question about that. So why try to beam something, you know, crank up the power and beam something in from the outside? I totally. I agree with you on this. I think it's correct observation. What do you say, Monica?
Yeah. So again, I completely agree with that concept. Users indoors. We have a technology to do indoor. We actually have multiple technologies to do indoor. Yes. Let's do indoors. And this is going to get only worse with the metaverse, because a lot of people think of the metaverse as a 5G technology. It's just going to be a Wi-Fi technology, because most of the metaverse stuff is going to be indoors, or I hope, because, you know, for security, safety reasons. So we really need to think about connectivity as being generated indoors and provided indoors. We can do not only we can do it, we do it already. So there's nothing actually new to do. You know, as you say, you know, there's no 5G and 6 gigahertz. You know, indoor connectivity, we have it. It's Wi-Fi. Yeah, and you can do small cells if you want to. That's perfectly fine. That's the way we need to go. Yeah. As a society. So the thing is, and I think that's the problem when people look at it from the mobile operator point of view. Clearly, for a mobile operator, having the 6 gigahertz band is advantageous, but we need to look not at the mobile operator or anybody else. We need to look at the overall society and the overall connectivity.
So a good friend of mine who does a lot of work in the offload or convergence space says, it is not useful to have capacity if you can't deliver capacity to their right place.
Exactly.
Right? It is not useful. It's like saying, he used the analogy. It's like saying to a drowning man, you know, there's lots of oxygen up here, right? But it doesn't help this person. And the same way with the mobile operators, they have trouble getting indoors, and it's always been like that. And for that, something else should be used. And cranking up the power and using a lot of energy to get indoors is not the way to conserve energy, right?
And that's the way, that's the strategy that they've been using, because there's not, frankly, there's not a whole lot you can do. If you want to go inside, you just have to, power it up. And at 6 gigahertz, because of the incumbents, you can not only there is a frequency issue that as you go up in frequency, your reach is shorter, but also because of the incumbents, your power levels are going to be lower. So you have a double penalty there. So and the thing is that even if you manage to get inside, the link budget is so basically you reduce the efficiency and performance of the macro cell.
Yeah, and the data rate goes down because of course the link budget is no good and all of that.
But the comment I really wanted to do that to Dean's thing. Okay, okay, offload is good. And it's good for everybody. And it's good for, I would say that it's good for the mobile operators in the first place, because it's a free lunch for them, because they don't have to pay for it and they have to build less infrastructure. And one thing that the orange paper, I thought that it was really important, is they basically say, okay, we can do it. They actually said that it's not been successful, but my phone is on, my providers put me on Wi-Fi in whichever way they can.
Yeah.
And I'm happy about it. But they talk about getting the households, the subscribers, to be on board. So if you tell people, look, if you use Wi-Fi, it's good for the environment. If you try to encourage them, if you have some buy-in, if you let them monitor their sleep, so I think that this is really an important point.
Yes, this is the orange report, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They will even go so far as to educate the consumer to use more Wi-Fi. That's what
yes, exactly. And you can say, I'm giving you some credit if you use sleep, for instance, or something like that. You can encourage people to do it. So I think that, didn't mention some regulation. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. Maybe there is some form, but I see that there is a lot of scope for the operators to encourage that. Not to force it, because if you force it, that just goes down the drain, and then people.
So this is more. You're talking about the orange report, right?
Yes.
So this is more or less a direct quote from the report. It may be paraphrased though. That Wi-Fi offload is a source of This is by Orange, or it's not written by Orange, but it's commissioned by Orange.
But it's commissioned. Yeah.
This is essentially, and Orange France has expressed this. So they're saying Wi-Fi offload is a source of reduced energy consumption because Wi-Fi networks are more efficient. That's what they're saying. That's actually what they're saying in the report. And it makes intuitive sense, but they've actually basically confirmed it. And this is a major operative, of course, saying these things. So I would tend to believe that they're right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But so this is, so I think that there is a lot that we can do that doesn't even require new technology, new equipment, or so there is a lot of money on the table here. We just need to think about it differently.
Here's the thing. Offload actually does not require, to my knowledge, any new standard, anything that's not there already.
No,
it does not. By the way, I have to say we have a ton of comments over there. We're falling behind. I don't know if you want to read.
Yeah, no, let's go. Okay, so there is Yukam Manor that says that there is some problem in Finland getting mobile radio signals indoors.
There isn't a lot of countries
everywhere. In Europe, it's almost worse than in US because you have thicker walls.
Yes, in US there's a lot of building with wood essentially, right? So it might be a little bit easier.
And even so, in the US, it's just like, we do have a problem, Okay, then Pasquale Cataldi is my next guest, and we're going to talk about 6 gigahertz.
Oh, good. Okay.
So devices such as smart TV and NAS usually perform updates during the night. Mobile phones do backups during the night. Turning Wi-Fi off during the night would have a lot of side effects. So yes, and
maybe your Tesla won't update either because it's sitting there in the garage wanting to update.
Well, So you need Wi-Fi on all the time, but I think that there are some sleep mechanisms that allow you to. So there is one that. Basically the access point keeps waking up and check, or you can have a not so deep sleep. So there is not, it's not like you're asleep or awake. there's a
Right.
lot of in between, so you
Right.
can still have the connectivity. However, depending on what you have, or maybe let's say you have a 2 or 3 access points, and maybe they don't all need to be on at night or something like that.
Yeah.
And I
So-
think the other thing is to have the devices work with the access point or whatever it is to coordinate the sleep pattern. So I think that there's a lot of work that can be done with the device vendors, because actually most of the consumption is in the device. So
Yes.
it's important to have good sleeping habits in the devices as well.
Yeah. So this is also what the folks at Soft at Home said. They said if you want to, you can get to a certain level of power reduction. If you want to get past that, then the chipset folks, Wi-Fi chipset folks, and probably the standards organizations have to work together to get this organized into a framework for power reduction, right? Which is of course also possible, although there is clearly a lead time for that, right? So I think is
yeah, but again, the amount of power consumption that goes into your access point / router compared to say your fridge, your heating, or you driving to go. I mean, if you don't go on a trip, on an airplane trip, if you're worried about this, if you just skip one trip by plane through the year, you can just go Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi access point is good for life.
You're good for life.
You don't have to worry.
So in the big picture, as I said, you're absolutely right. So in the big picture, we're talking peanuts. But again, we kind of have look. The honest truth is, I'm a climate skeptic. I'm not a big believer in all this stuff. But it is a political reality, however, that regulators are, examining where can we save and whatever. So we have to deal with that. And as an industry person, we have to take that seriously. So anyway, there's a ton of comments.
Okay, let's just keep going here. So there is a recent, Yuka said again, there's this recent thesis from Austin versus the actual data from thousands of base stations and their idle and low dependent energy consumption. The numbers are very high. Well, I think that one thing is that there is a lot of sleeping technologies that are available for every technology, for both cellular and Wi-Fi, but they're not used as much because in the past, well, in the present, I would say, that the best way to get things done is to power them on. So like I have 3 access points in my home. Do I need them? No, but it doesn't really matter that much. No. I bike, so I have I have the free. But but what I'm saying is that that's the easy way to solve the problem. But if that becomes more of an issue, there are ways to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So I like this comment by Jose Valle. I don't think I know him, but he said, and this I didn't know. Today, Wi-Fi residential routers have features to reduce power energy in an automatic way, power passive mode. If there's little device traffic. I did not know this, Jose. It's a good input. By the way, write to me if Claus at Wi-FiNOW.events.com to tell me more, because I'm actually curious about that. I was not aware of that.
Yes, yeah, and you guys in the audience, if there is anything, just send the link, put the link in the chat as well. Yeah, well, but you think about it, you can imagine that you can use multiple channels, single channel. If you have a repeater, you can get a repeater off. There's all sorts of ways that you can do it to manage the network, or to manage traffic. So Pasquale mentioned the updates overnight. Then there's a question of sometimes compressing video or making it more efficient. So there is all sorts of things that can be done over and above the access point.
Correct. Can I just mention one thing? Did you place the link to the Wix report that was in fact, I think, commissioned or at least sponsored or paid for by the Wi-Fi Alliance?
Yes.
So, so the one finding that we also wrote about at Wi-FiNOW, that's kind of the core of the report, says that if you do not have, they're comparing 2 scenarios. They're comparing one where you don't have the top of the 6 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi, another where you do, right? What we're saying is if you don't have it and 5G somehow has to take over that traffic, then compared to the scenario where you do have it, you'd have to expend 16% more energy on 5G taking over that traffic. That's what they're saying. And that seems like a reasonable number to me. I would have thought actually it's higher.
I was
Well-
about to say the same thing. It's conservative.
It's conservative.
But
But
you
it
know
is-
why? Because, I think that it is because they also look at the rural scenario, which I don't think. Why would you? I mean, in a rural environment, you don't need 6 gigahertz for fixed wireless access. I mean, because there is a lot of spectrum anyway, so it doesn't. I don't think it affects either Wi-Fi or not. I mean,
You might. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, is that so? I don't know. But yeah, I think that I would be able to make a model that shows a bigger number. But I think that they want it to be how can I say,
want it to be
conservative.
conservative and not-
They want to be that nobody's gonna, and
Nobody's gonna
so
attack them.
so to go back on the other field, so there is the Analysys Mason report that was sponsored by Huawei. So the opposite camp.
Yeah.
And there they look at their argument is that having 6 gigahertz available for mobile operators is good because it's going to be more efficient than using mid-band to provide traffic. And clearly that's always the case, that the more spectrum you have, the more energy efficient you can be. But the problem is that spectrum is not an infinite resource. So the question is not whether it's going to be better for an operator to have 6 gigahertz, because the answer is yes, it is better for them. The question is that the better use of the spectrum across technologies and across the whole population? And that's the problem, is that it's much more efficient to use 6 gigahertz for unlicensed.
So I'm not okay. So there's just one thing I'm not sure I agree with you. So let's say some of the operators got 6 gigahertz band. Now, first of all, they're compelled to use it, right?
Right.
You can't have it and say we wanted it and say, oh, by the way, we don't think we've got a business case, so we're not going to use it. No, it doesn't work like that. The regulator is going to tell them to use it. So you better be totally sure that you can actually get, you have a positive business case out of that, because otherwise you just got a lot of
nothing.
And you're pouring money down the toilet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the whole story about, and frankly, they don't have a great track record, Monica, because remember what happened to millimeter wave. Yes, I know that they're now using millimeter wave for FWA, right? And that's fine. 5G FWA, it's fine. But they actually seriously tried to make people believe that we're going to use millimeter wave to beam to people on the street, right? So, and of course that was never going to work, right? So, and it didn't. It went nowhere. But that was part of the 5G vision that people are going to do that. So anyway, what I'm pointing at is their ideas of how to use spectrum and for what are not entirely clear, and some of them don't stand to reason. So what I'm saying is it's not necessarily a given that they are better off with 6 gigahertz. They have to think hard about what they're going to do with 6 gigahertz and the sharing, whatever. There are arguments, and I haven't seen the models, but there are arguments from, this is actually something that I discussed with the Wi-Fi lines, saying that even if mobile were able to use the 6 gigahertz band, because you can't use it the same way that you'd use a normal mobile band, because the scales are not there, and you can never really commercially get it to fit together to benefit you much. So this is
well, the other thing is that I don't know why people don't usually make this point, but if it's unlicensed, it's not just Wi-Fi, so operators can just use it wherever they want to for free.
Yes.
So
for free.
Wherever, and clearly I think that everybody, even the Analysys Mason report, they just look at specific scenarios, like a dense urban scenario. That's where you would go for it. Yes. There's so much spectrum. So if there are, the argument of the Analysys Mason report is that they don't actually compare Wi-Fi to cellular, because they say you do not need the extra spectrum, so it doesn't really matter how much you consume because you don't need it. Which is true. If you don't need it, now I question that claim, but they don't actually make a comparison. So if you don't need it, sure. But if I don't need it as Wi-Fi, then you, mobile operator, can deploy it, because I'm not using it. I'm not just using it. Well, then use it for outdoor small, and at 6 gigahertz, you can have people to have indoor 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi, and you can have your outdoor. And in some locations, it might make sense.
Yeah. So there's
But you can do it. They can do it. They can do it anytime.
Sure. There's a really, really good comment.
Okay.
I totally agree with this, but if, can I just read it? Jose,
Yeah, read it.
If Jose Vale, and I don't know him. Do you know Jose?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Jose, thank you for your good questions. If providers offer XGS-PON service, they need to have Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz band to use XGS-PON pipe between 2 and 8 gigabits per second. Absolutely, for sure. There is no way you can get that to I mean, that kind of capacity will not reach anybody inside the house, or it will reach this much if you don't have the 6 gigahertz band. By the way, let me quote Ajit Pai, who was obviously former FCC commissioner, released this 6 gigahertz band and visionary, I think. He actually said, we need this Wi-Fi capacity and this new Wi-Fi spectrum to offload from 5G, or for the benefit of it. He actually said that, and I was obviously clapping in my little hands when he said this. That finally a guy who gets it, and he did a fantastic job. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Actually, so the Pasquale mentioned, like, the concept of offload. He says he has a problem with it, and it is actually it works both ways, because sometimes Wi-Fi is not good and you want to offload.
Yes.
So you might need to go from Wi-Fi to mobile to Wi-Fi. And so and it is true that that's from the viewpoint of the operator, right? So I don't think of using Wi-Fi as an offload. My mobile operator thinks about it that way. But I think that, it sort of makes sense from a mobile operator point of view to think about, all those devices that they have out there. And there is a way in which they can basically put them somewhere else and they do not affect their network. It's powerful.
They don't affect your network. But what's also true, I think, now, I mean, you remember this, Monica. We had huge offload discussions in the past. I mean, 10 years ago, remember, it was massive. So, this is to some extent coming back a little bit. So these discussions have started again, and in fact, my point was, what was my point? My point is this is coming back, and the Wi-Fi that we have today is a lot better than it was then. And actually, using that mechanism is the best road to efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Using PassPoint, for example. There are other methods as well, but PassPoint, for example, to allow that offload, and again, it's a slightly bothersome word because it's not necessarily offloading anything, but it's putting, in fact, the user experience in focus, because you can quite often get a better experience indoors with Wi-Fi than you can, than with the 5G beaming in from the outside, right?
Most of the time, I would say.
Uh-huh.
So what I would say is, because when Wi-Fi came on, everybody would say, well, with Wi-Fi you don't need, with 5G you don't need Wi-Fi anymore, because that's not the case. And it's not the case because 5G cannot give you that speed. It's because it's the capacity issue. It's not the speed. It's not the interface.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to change. So 5G has not changed anything as far as I can see in terms of the use between, you want to be able to say, okay, sometimes I have switched off Wi-Fi because you are in a circumstance where it is actually better to be on cellular. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing.
But I'm all for
I have to say,
and all that. But you don't actually, even without it's not perfect, but it's really got so much better.
So much better.
And if you remember that you had to find out the SSID, type the damn password every single time, you don't have to do that anymore.
No, but the other thing that's important also in the context of offload is the devices are much, much smarter in picking either cellular or Wi-Fi. And we also did not have this in 2013. It was not very sophisticated. This is actually one of the things that I really want to study that I know some folks that know a lot more about this. That I want to study. I want to find out how these selections are done, because I think that's a big part of the story. Because what you have to make sure of course, if you're in an offload scenario, is that these network selections are done reasonably consistently well, right? So you don't have to hand off to something that's terrible and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just in fact, I was just talking to somebody at Kiro that is Cable Labs
Yeah.
related. And what they're doing is actually doing the opposite to see, when you don't have, well, you have Wi-Fi works, but maybe your broadband connection doesn't work, or, whatever
Right.
the case may be,
Right.
that things like that happen to
Yes.
everybody, right? So
Yeah.
if the sort of the Wi-Fi doesn't work, then the device has to say, hold on here, there is no connectivity, let me go on to cellular. And
Right.
so you need to have some intelligence in the device, and
Yes.
devices have got so much better. And I think that it's important to educate the user so that you have a say in how you want to manage it, because I don't want to be put into cellular if I don't have an unlimited plan, for instance.
Mhm.
So you have to sort of think it through, but there is a possibility, and things are getting better by the day,
Yes.
because
They
it's just like, I think that no matter where you stand,
Yes.
you need connectivity and you need multiple interfaces. So, as much as I love Wi-Fi, clearly you do need a public network, because when you go
No, of course you
outside
do.
the home,
Oh, there's no
you
argument.
need to. So that it's not a question of one versus the other; it's how you
No, You
integrate.
need both. You need it outside your home, and you need it in your car.
Exactly.
And you need it also a lot when you travel, because but you can hunt for Wi-Fi networks. I do that quite often.
No,
But-
right. But the question is how to put them together. So
Yes.
the question is that how to make it so that you don't have to go through a lot of pain going through. Is it Wi-Fi? Is it not? I don't care.
But ideally, to me, the idealized, fully efficient scenario is essentially that you don't try to beam through anything. The coverage essentially stops at the door, and when you go through the door, you're in a Wi-Fi territory, and then you don't have to, you don't have to do anything more than that. It's totally idealized. It probably will never happen, but
But it is happening. No, I disagree. It is happening already, right? Because most of the time when you're indoor,
that's actually what happens.
Yeah, what
in
happens?
practice,
Yeah.
that was what happened. No, yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. That is what happens. You walk through the door and you're on Wi-Fi and you're at home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to do anything. I mean, I can't even. I mean, okay, I can stop it, but that's just
Yes.
the moment I arrive, it switches over.
Yes.
And
But
so,
I think these reports, I mean, coming back to the main subject, I think some of these reports are really good. As I said, I didn't read the Analysys Mason, but I think the Wix study is good. And as we talked about, I think it's quite conservative, actually. And there's a lot of detail in it, of course, if you want. But I think the scenarios that they're looking at are not crazy complicated and and fairly easy to understand. So it's not super hard to understand. And also the Orange report, I think, is great. And there's a massive level of detail in that. And because it's Orange, I think it weighs heavily, right? Because it's an operative point of view. So then there was some good. Shall we have a look?
May I say something about the Wix report, which I completely agree. I think it's more on the conservative side. What I have a problem in general with all those studies is that they look at what is it the technology can do, basically at capacity. But the question is to understand how, what is the power efficiency based on usage. And so there is a lot of changes. So for instance, if you are at home and you have a very good cell coverage, and you only have one smartphone, we went through this, and that's your only device, then maybe Wi-Fi is not very efficient. However, if you have a lot of devices, the Analysys report was mentioning like 8 devices per home. I have 8 devices per room. And I think that, a lot of people have many more devices. When you have all those devices, then if you can imagine all of them going over LTE or 5G, that would be unsustainable. I mean,
no question about it.
It just wouldn't work. So once you have an access point at home, the incremental cost, so you need to look at the incremental cost of adding 6 gigahertz or whatever, it is minimal because you already have it. So when you make the comparison, you have to look at the usage and not at what the technology can do. Because what the technology to do is the number, it's kind of the foundation. The question is how you use it. Anyway, go ahead.
I totally agree about it. Here's the other thing. So most of this, most of Wi-Fi services to the home, not, of course, maybe not most of it, but the high gigabit rate or high data rate services are backed by fiber these days, right? A lot of them are, not everything. And fiber is a low energy consumption technology. There's no question about it,
Yes.
right? Because it's light and so on and so forth. So that's also part of the picture. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, the Wix study includes that, but I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, it does. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the end to end, because it's not just the
Yes.
so it's
No.
the access plus the backhaul, and then there is some element that is going to be common. But
Yeah.
no, but even if you don't use say fiber and you use cable
Or cable, yeah.
wireless or whatever, it's still, you know, I mean, I've seen other data that seems to be this seems to be more efficient anyway. Well, but the thing is that let's say that you have a very inefficient backhaul. Okay, let's say that it doesn't matter because you already have the access point to connect to your cameras, your TV, and whatever. So adding the smartphone doesn't really matter, and it's not like you're not going to need the broadband connection.
No.
So I think that we have to think about the incremental use. So
the incremental use is, you're absolutely right. It becomes a little bit overly theoretical in some of these models. But as we talked about before, Monica, you know, modeling, you and I don't do it anymore, thankfully, because you after a while you discover you can get any answer you want, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the honest truth about modeling, and you can get any answer you want. And especially the more complicated the model is, the easier, relatively speaking, it is to get any answer. I mean, I used to do modeling for Nokia for a long time, many years, and in the end, I mean, come on, what answer would you like, Mr. Client?
And I think that this raises an important issue, and I'm going to have a quote from the Orange Report that says, "Reporting instead of doing is greenwashing," and I think this is really important. Yeah. And the reason for that is that now there is a lot of pressure, correct pressure, to report on power usage. But that's sort of like filing taxes. You know, you have to do it, and it's a good thing to do, but it doesn't tell you how to be profitable.
Yes.
And so being able to report and tell how much you're using doesn't tell you how to use less.
Yes.
And so it's important to understand what is that we can do. So we need to have the model that tells you what you want. So I say, I want to reduce consumption by 20%. And the model can tell you how to get there, because how do I get to that number? What assumptions I need to make? And this is where the power of the model is. And then I guess that's why obviously a model like the WIC model cannot do, because it's not meant to do that. So I'm not faulting it. But from an operator point of view, you want to understand, how do I get there? Or from a household point of view, how do I get there?
How do you get there? That's a completely fair and reasonable way to use a model, by the way, and probably the right way to use it. So can I just read this, because I like the...
Okay, go ahead.
This is from...
I lost track of this. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I think this is from Jose again. So there are service providers with more than 95% via Wi-Fi, so they spend less than 5% traffic on the mobile network. With this traffic reduction in mobile network, you can imagine that they save a lot of millions of euros in core and access mobile network. Yeah, absolutely. And we also know, of course, I didn't know that the number was that high. The highest I think I've seen is like 85, 90%, but those are numbers from some years ago, and I think it was in Germany, Japan, places like that. I know that, for example, Spectrum Mobile, they've stated that but they're obviously an MVNO, but they've stated that 80% of their traffic runs on Wi-Fi, and they're obviously interested in getting that number as high as possible, right?
Yeah.
But I like that.
But Ofcom, which is independent,
yes,
they just said 73% Wi-Fi on Android devices, though. So, so that's actually much higher. I mean, the overall traffic is going to be much higher. So, you know, if you include cameras, computers, laptops, and all that. So this is just and this is an important thing. It's only smartphones.
Yes, it's only one thing. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, and this is something I can remember. But so basically, if you just reduce just by little Wi-Fi use, you create a much bigger increase on the macro, because so if you reduce 1% on Wi-Fi, you increase macro traffic by I can do the math now, but you know, by 5 or 10%.
Yes.
So it has a huge impact. Every little change you do in Wi-Fi.
It's not a good deal for the operator.
It's not a good deal for them.
It's not a good deal. All right. Very
Unless they have a network that is completely empty, and so they want to have more traffic.
Then they have other
don't.
problems.
But then they have other problems. It's not good for the TCO.
Yeah.
Anyway, do we have
we have any more questions? I thought, okay, there was Yuka, I guess, from Finland, maybe.
I think it's from Finland. Yes, I don't know, but I guess.
Yeah, at least the name is very Finnish. The slight challenge with fiber is that it has little load proportional energy consumption. So when you fire up the laser, pretty much all the time is at full power. Mobile and Wi-Fi base stations still have a low power mode. Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good point.
but you know, cell sites also need backhaul.
Yes.
They still need fiber. You need
yes.
So
no, that's true. It's part of as we said in the beginning, it's complicated. And the question is, where do you draw the line for the comparison? Because do you do the entire network and all the use? I mean, the model would be gigantic, right? Maybe it is. I don't know what these Wix folks and so on.
Yeah, well, the thing is that at some point you have to, okay, yes, there is some consumption, and you can get to a point where you say, oh, I'm not going to do anything. But if you think about that, you know, a lot of people would tell you now that because they have Zoom and they can do Zoom like we're doing now, you don't have to travel as much. Okay, so there is a lot of savings that our 24 continuous connectivity brings us that we can save energy in some other parts.
Yes.
So we need to say, so fiber has to be on, you know.
You're right.
I mean, we were like Wi-Fi needs to be on. It can sleep, but
it becomes almost slightly ridiculous if you include the effect that you don't travel into the Wi-Fi calculation. Right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I mean, then you can forget it. I mean, it's game over, right? For the opposition.
Well, in my report, I have an example that somebody compared boiling water in a kettle. So it doesn't even have to, you know, boiling water in a kettle compared to 1 hour video streaming, including the device power.
Yes.
It's so if you really want to, just don't make coffee. You know, but that's not what you want to do. I mean, at some point, there is a quality of life issue, and I am very,
of course,
I'm very like, you know.
But the politicians, some of them, they love this. They love this, and it's very, and it's also very simplified, right? It's oversimplified, and unfortunately, these are the arguments they prefer. Oversimplified arguments, many of them, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, so, no, well, because but it's not just politicians, it's, you know, so it's much easier. So that's the issue with greenwashing, is that it's easy to look good, but it's not easy to do good.
Yeah, no, absolutely, totally.
And we have to distinguish the two, because there is a lot that we can do, and we should do, because you know, like the sleep mechanism doesn't cost us anything.
Yes.
Why not?
Yes,
you know, if you want to have coffee, you should use your kettle.
I totally agree.
Anyway,
are we stopping in a couple of minutes?
Yes, we are.
We are. Can I plug my event, Monica, just for a second now that I
Yes, we'll let you do that.
Maybe people were you going to mention that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So my event is the Wi-Fi World Congress, and it's happening in Toronto, in gorgeous Canada, next month, September 18th to 20th. Monica, by the way, zip on over to Canada if you have time. You're very welcome.
I cannot do that.
You can't make it?
No, but now that I'm in Europe a lot of time, I'm going to be helping out more. But yeah, because I'm sure that's good. And it's only one of the events, because you have events all.
We have lots of events. We have lots of, but this is our North America event for the year, and we're excited about it because we got a huge amount of interest from a huge number of countries. So we're super happy about it. And we did not know what was going to happen when you put a Wi-Fi event in Canada, but good things happened apparently. And although it's unrelated completely, I have nothing to do with it. The Canadians actually just, as you know, they just authorized the first AFC, which means standard power Wi-Fi in 6 gigahertz, is coming to Canada as the first country in the world. So they can be proud of it. And I'm sure the FCC is sweating a little bit because of it. So we tease them a little bit, but obviously they're onto it and working on it, I'm sure. But anyway, that was my plug for the show. And by the way, next year, and by the way, we're going to Bangkok in November. So if you want to come to beautiful Bangkok,
that might be, I mean, that's tempting.
Bangkok is a great place, and it's also great for events, and it's great in so many different ways, and we love doing event there. So we'll be doing that next year. Lots more events, and we're coming to the US, of course, and all other places as well. But Toronto, 18 to 20. Go to wifinowglobal.com.
Okay.
That was my plug. Sorry to be shamelessly advertising.
That's okay. We can be shameless advertising whenever we want. We're on our own.
Yes, it's true.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It was a great conversation. And thanks to all the audience as well. Kendra, over to you.
Okay, great. Well, that will conclude our webinar for today. Thanks again to our speakers for that wonderful conversation, and thanks to our audience for those great comments. A recording of today's webinar will be available on the sensafili.com website in the coming days. And we have 3 upcoming webinars. The next one will be September 14th on Open RAN and the path to 6G, followed by a webinar on September 27th on the best way to share 6 gigahertz spectrum. And we'll have another one on October 19th on getting RIS off the ground with AI and machine learning. And registration for those will be available at sensafili.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.